Kirby is a series that is very near and dear to me. I've probably only played a tenth of the full series when you consider all the spin-offs. Seems like maybe I get around to buying every fourth game that comes out. Despite being drawn to this little Puffball's siren song every few years, I've been missing out on so many of these games. I'm excited for the Forgotten Lands, and I want to go back to the beginning. Kirby Dream Land was originally released for the Game Boy in 1992 by Nintendo and HAL Lab. Anyone familiar with the series, or even Kirby as he appeared in Super Smash Bros., may feel thrown off. Kirby has his trademark vacuum-powered suck and blow abilities. Kirby can float like a balloon, paddling through the air with two little fin nubbins. Even the ability to do a little bit of damage by falling on someone is in this game, but strangely enough, Kirby cannot copy an enemy's abilities. Fittingly, going back to that kind of sucks. I remember playing this game after beating Kirby's Adventure and Superstar as a kid, and did not get past your inability to get fire powers or the cutter ability by eating enemies. Now I realize that there were probably limitations to the Game Boy hardware, or maybe that idea just wasn't thought of yet. Instead, Kirby can pick up temporary powers similar to traditional platformers. Items like the sweet potato that make you gas up and shoot air out of your mouth, essentially turning Kirby into an extremely bloated Vic Viper. I was surprised to see the spicy curry that would later appear in Smash Bros. Brawl make an appearance, which allows Kirby to breathe fire. The microphone ability and the invincibility lollipop are also around, like in two areas. These items are almost hardly worth mentioning since the game is so incredibly short, but they show up in later games, so that's why I'm mentioning it. I mean, as I mentioned, the game's short. I think I beat this thing in less than an hour, maybe even less than 45 minutes. As a kid, I found the lack of copy abilities disappointing compared to later games in the series that I was more familiar with. As an adult, I can recognize the charm Dreamland has, and that it makes for a fairly fun prototype for what is to come. So while Kirby can only shoot things back at enemies, that can sometimes lead to some pretty fun boss fights and some hectic levels, while also achieving its goal of simple gameplay that is more forgiving than the standard platformers of the era. Starting things off is Green Greens, which is a pretty standard and straightforward level. Most enemies in this level just sort of wander around or float towards you. Kirby is an easy game, especially for the era. Kirby has several pips of health, he can fly infinitely, making pits practically a non-issue. Every enemy is vulnerable in this stage to you. The player can get through this level just floating and breathing on enemies. You could even just walk into some of them and still keep going. I don't see Mario doing that to no Goomba. Copying aside, Dreamland sets many precedents for the rest of the series. Wispy Woods is the boss of the first level, and it's a stationary tree that drops apples on you. As a first boss, he is kind of perfect for learning the core method of attack in Kirby's Dreamland. The player just needs to point towards Wispy when you make Kirby spit out the apple. As long as you understand how spitting out enemies works and manage to hit this future broadside of a barn, you can proceed. The second stage is Lololo's Castle, which has this spooky aesthetic with witches and ghosts. The structure of the castle is the most labyrinthine in the entire game, but it's not exactly a Zelda game in terms of its complexity. The enemies here are a bit trickier. Enemies can all of a sudden appear before Kirby to attack, or quickly chase you around in the case of the Two-Face enemy, whom takes a move from the Mario playbook and behaves suspiciously like Phanto. Luckily, unlike Phanto, Two-Face is easy to kill. A series mainstay, Gordo, shows up, which is an enemy that almost acts more like an obstacle than a malicious adversary. Gordo are invincible, so you need to really steer clear. Look how sharp it is. Kirby's gonna hurt the roof of his mouth as he tries to eat that. In this stage, you square off...
I didn't quite catch that. Could you please repeat it?
In this stage, you square off against Lololo and La La La, who are evil doppelgangers of characters from another HAL Lab series, Adventures of Lolo, also known as Eggerland. The duo slide blocks around, and compared to the wall of punishment that is Wispy Woods, they're an actual challenge. You need to sneak up behind them, take the block, and spit it back to deal damage. You are diving in and out of each floor to avoid their movements, while also trying to counter before the duo Benny Hill through all these doors. Timing is key in this fight, but the pattern is relatively easy to learn. Float Island has some pretty chill tunes because it's Kirby's big day at the beach. This level I find less stressful than the castle. The castle introduced us to swimming, but this level extends the swimming segments even further. In this game, Kirby has no way to attack underwater, which sort of makes water a bit of a weakness to Kirby, though really the biggest obstacle in this stage are the coconuts that love to just drop from off screen. 25 years later, and this coconut still gets me. The end of the stage has Kirby launch into the clouds in order to eat that minty leaf and fight Kabula the blimp. Kabula is a departure from the standard Dreamland boss because, as I mentioned, Kirby is just Gradius for the next few minutes. This genre change always messed me up as a kid, and this is usually where my playthrough would end. Now I feel like he's not too bad. Kirby has some pretty generous damage buffering after taking a hit, and you can just spam puffs of minty fresh potato breath at his blimpy face. As a boss, Kabula is the odd one out. You aren't really learning anything new about Kirby's repertoire of actions, but it's kind of a novelty to get to this shooter segment, and this Kabula boss fight is setting up another precedent for the rest of the series. The fourth level, Bubbly Clouds, has bottomless pits and fairly aggressive enemies like the Scarfy, which is this horrifying little demon that can't be sucked up. When you try to suck up Scarfy, it gets pissed and dives at you. It can, however, be killed by hitting it with another enemy or by puffing some air on it. Maybe I was too quick to judge. Kabula taught us something after all.
That Kirby's burps are something fierce.
You really have to utilize Kirby's ability to fly in this stage, since ledges are often out of reach, and dodging the highly aggressive Sir Kibbles chucking boomerangs at you becomes a necessity. Kracko and Kracko Jr. are by far the hardest bosses you will face in perhaps the entire game, because you have to anticipate certain attacks, you must dodge while also trying to grab the Waddle Doos it births. Then the Waddle Doos must be fired at Kracko while dodging its laser beams. It's a battle of twitch reflexes, as well as patience and strategy. Rounding things off, the final level is a little bit of a letdown. Taking a cue from Mega Man, Mount DDD is a boss rush. For a game so short, it really feels like the developers trying to stall for time. You just fought Kracko, and you immediately can fight him again. More than likely, you fought Wispy Woods less than 30 minutes ago. I love a good boss fight, and these fights are kind of fun, but it's just way too soon. An 8-hour game could pull off a boss rush, but Dreamland really can't justify it. Also, before these fights, you were sent to these really short levels resembling aspects of prior levels. It's just a little bit annoying. I do want to point out it's kind of trippy that you touch another Kirby at the end of each of these to progress. I'm not sure why that happens, but that's very video gamey, I guess. Once you've beaten the Fab 4 of these repeat boss fights, you square off against King DDD. The fight with King DDD actually checks the box for one of my favorite video game tropes, the rival fight. He's Bluto to Kirby's Popeye. DDD is pretty similar to Kirby, just bigger. He could suck in air, jump fairly high. Unlike every boss, DDD is capable of a wide range of movement and feels to be less based on a pattern in the way he attacks. He chases after Kirby with his mallet, and you have to learn to dodge while also finding a window to make your shot. It can at times be pretty tricky because DDD likes to get in your face. Dealing the final blow treats you to a cutscene where DDD is sent flying away, and Kirby inflates to such a size that he just lifts DDD's castle away, providing food to the citizens of Dreamland. Why eat the rich when you could eat the rich's food? Probably tastes a little bit better. Penguin meat, I don't know, maybe it's good. After the credits, you learn that there is an input you can use at the title screen that lets you do a challenge mode. This extra mode is really interesting in several ways. Enemies are much tougher, dealing more damage when they attack Kirby, and oh, they will attack Kirby. These guys are bloodthirsty. Many of the original sprites are replaced, so shots of the cannon becomes Blatzy, who shoots bullets much more erratically and at a greater tempo. Bronto Berts are replaced by the speedier Coozers. Sir Kibbles, whose attacks are a somewhat mid-ranged boomerang, are replaced with Boomers, whose attacks cross the entire screen. The Parasols are now Kirby-seeking drones when a Waddle Dee lets go of them. You get the picture. Common enemies are far harder to dodge and far more hard-hitting. The real Kirby's Dream Land starts here. The bosses are also remixed. Wispy serving as a real gatekeeper because it can now drop Gordos that deal way more damage than before. Lololo and La 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 have a new arena to fight in and are quicker. Kabula is much more aggressive with its cannon fire and its ramming attack. Krako has new patterns and now drops bombs, which makes the window of opportunity to attack Krako left open to just a small little crack. If you thought King Dedede was aggressive before, he just apes out now. And when you consider the end cap of each level, all these changes are, like, awesome. They're really challenging, really fun. They really bring a new spin to, the gameplay, the kind of, like, breezy gameplay. If you want more of a challenge, it's here. The problem is the final stage's boss rush is just more unforgiving, and it's now the worst part of the game. You have a certain amount of lives and a certain amount of health. You have to fight all 4 bosses and Dedede. Lose all the lives you have, and that means you have to redo every fight and the brief little stage that only serves to drain a little bit of health before the boss. You must learn to bait certain patterns and perfectly time the window to counterattack. It would be really thrilling if not for the harsh setback if you make too many mistakes. Dreamland has no save feature. If you wanted to take a breather, you'd pause and let those batteries drain out, or turn off the Game Boy and start from the beginning. In the extra mode, Kirby's Dream Land becomes a whole different game. Sure, the levels are the same, but you are no longer playing a game designed to be an intro to platforming that everyone can enjoy. Extra mode brought me a whole new appreciation for Dreamland. I had no idea how far its changes made the game a legitimately tough platformer, which asks so much more from the player. Thinking about it, Extra Mode is also the beginning of a Kirby series staple, as well as a mark of authorship from Masahiro Sakurai, the director of Kirby's Dream Land. Sakurai would go on to make games crammed with extra content. It's a trend you see in every game he directs. I see this Extra Mode as the humble seed that will one day become the flex of thousands of unlockables that you'll see in Kid Icarus Uprising or the Smash Bros. Series. The simple design for Kirby's Dream Land was a perfect game for the Game Boy, and you could see it even down to the character design. Kirby is perfect. He is simple, and quite possibly the most expressive character to grace the Game Boy. To this day, little cutscenes between the chapters gets a sensible little chuckle out of me. Waddling around with a mouthful of Waddle Doo is very cute. All the enemies are really cute. So cute, I almost feel bad for ruining their peaceful days. Except for these two, they could go to hell. The bosses are also fairly expressive, and even the stage design shows off a little bit of Dedede's tough guy wrestler machismo, which all cracks away when you finally beat him and you get that little cutscene. It's pretty satisfying seeing him grovel and cry like that. Coming back to this white whale of a game from my childhood has really given me some appreciation into the genesis of the Kirby series. I used to really not care much for this game. As compared to its sequels, it felt archaic. Really though, Dreamland is both different from all the other mainland games, yet it's very familiar. You'll be familiar with the peppy music, the enemies you face, and like 90% of the future game's mechanics. Experiencing the Extra Mode was really refreshing, allowing me to see just how fun Kirby is when stretched to his breaking point. I can't wait to revisit the next game in the series, Kirby's Adventure, and I hope to see you there. Thank you so much for watching my video. Please consider leaving a comment, liking, and subscribing to my channel so I can review more cool games. Bye!